What we're going to do today, for those of you just joining us, we are going to finish up our one-step equations today. And yes, we are going to, if you're looking at page 4 in your pack, you're like, oh man, Miss Galley, fractions. But guys, nothing's going to change in our process. The only reason why I wanted to take some time with fractions is just because usually when people see fractions, they kind of freak out about it. But we're going to use our calculators, and that's okay. You guys take your test, and here you can use a calculator. When you guys take, like I said before, your ACT in the fall, or if you take Iowa assessments, you guys are going to have access to a calculator. That's an okay thing. So let's take a look at question number, let's look at actually number 14 together. I know, throwing you guys off a little bit. I want to look at 14 because 14 involves what's called a mixed number. If you look at 3 2/3, that's what we call a mixed number. We have that whole number and we have a fraction after it. That's a mixed number if you're not real fresh on that. What's going to be our step to solve that equation? We've spent a lot of time the last few classes solving. What's going to be our step to solve? What's going to be our step? What do you think, John?
Yeah. Change the improper fraction into a fraction.
We don't have to change anything yet. What's going to be my step to solve? Go ahead, John.
You do the opposite.
You do the opposite. So right now we're subtracting 3 2/3. So what's going to undo subtracting? What's going to do it, Sam? Addition. So we're going to add 3 2/3. Now, the reason I wanted to start with the mixed number is so we can talk about some ways we can enter that into our calculator. Okay? You can leave it as that mixed number, and we can see how to do that piece. Or what John had suggested, he said, change it to an improper fraction. So let's talk about that route, and then we can look at entering both of those things in, so I can bring my calculator up. Okay, so if we have 3 2/3, does anybody remember how to change that back? John, do you remember? You suggested it. Do you remember?
3 times 3 minus me plus 2.
All right, so we do multiply, and then we add. So we would have 3 times 3 is 9, and then we would add the 2. So we would do 9 plus 2. So we would end up with
What would be the denominator then?
11 over, what's our denominator? 3. It still stays 3. Okay, so let's talk. I'm going to bring my calculator up. I'm going to bring my other calculator up on the screen. And unfortunately, those of you guys watching this at home or listening to this, I can't do my calculator on the screen. I need to figure out how to do that sometime.
And sometime they'll have to drop them and have like a learning center so they can pass some class maybe.
All right, guys, so let's go ahead. 13, 15, and 16. So just 3 problems. Should only take us about 5 minutes to do or so.
If you're stuck, you need to
I'll ask for some volunteers, and then we will
If you're stuck, you should
do our last thing with fractions. So if we go through, we do a quick check for 13, 15, and 16. To undo addition, we're going to use subtraction. So we have 5/6 minus 1/4. And we get that n equals 7/12. In number 15, some of us struggled with some things like 15 last week because we see addition on this side. But what we have to look at, though, is this negative 1/8 and moving it to the other side. We need to get m by itself. So to get m by itself, we have to move the negative 1/8. The inverse or opposite of, or to undo a negative, we need a positive. So to solve something like number 15, we do actually have to add 1/8. So we have negative 7/24 plus 1/8, and our m equals negative 1/6. Last but not least, number 16, we're going to subtract 8.5 from both sides. So we have 5 1/3 minus 8 1/2. And we end up with 8 equals negative 3 1/6. Now, the one thing I've forgotten to do today is to make sure we go back and check. Just like using our inverse operations, checking doesn't change just because now we have fractions. So if I just do a quick refresher on how to check with number 13, we take what n equals and we substitute it back in for n. So instead of n, I'm going to write 7/12 plus 1/4 equals 5/6. And again, go ahead, guys, use your calculator. I'm not assessing you on whether or not you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. I'm assessing to see whether you know how to solve equations. And if we go to take any type of test in here, or your ACT, or your Iowa assessments in the spring, we can use calculators on all those things. So part of our advantages here is we're also learning how to use the calculator to our advantage and properly enter in. Last class we did decimals, today we're doing fractions, how to enter those things in. One final idea with our one-step equations. One final idea. If we look at number 17. In number 17, we have 2/3 right next to the x. So when that number is right next to the variable, I know it took us some getting used to the last few classes, but that means multiply. So this is 2/3 times x. So to undo multiplying, we divide. Now I know once upon a time, you guys all learned how to divide with fractions. And when you did that, you probably used a division sign, not a fraction bar like I did in that equation. So if we have 48 divided by 2/3, you probably learned something about flip and switch and things like that. Well, what you're really doing, division becomes multiplication, and then we do flip that second fraction. When we flip that second fraction, this is called a reciprocal. So dividing by a fraction, our little recall up here, again, once upon a time you learned it, not sure how long ago it was for you or the last time you used it, but to divide by a fraction, we really multiply by its reciprocal. We really multiply by its reciprocal is our trick. Now, since we do have the calculators to help us out, we really can just divide by a fraction in our calculator, and that's okay. Again, I apologize, I cannot get my calculator up on the screen. So we can use, I'll try to talk you through it. We can use the ABC key. You have your choice. You can do 48 divided by 2/3, or you can do 48 times 3/2, whichever works best for you. I wanted to talk about multiplying by the reciprocal because I know in your future math classes, some teachers do describe it that way versus just dividing by the fraction. So I wanted to make sure you had that recall of how we divide by a fraction, and then now you can have your choice. So if you want to, in your calculator, you can enter in 48 divided by, and then we do 2, our ABC key, and then 3. You should get, let's see, 48 divided by 2/3 is 72. You can also, if you want in your calculator, you can go the reciprocal way. You can enter 48 times 3, then the ABC key, and then 2. So it's entirely up to you which route you choose. I know most of you will probably just choose the division way and not have to worry about multiplying by the reciprocal, and that's okay. We're going to use the calculator technology piece to help us out with that, and that is an okay thing. So what I would like you to try, there are 7 problems left on this sheet. Let's try out these 7, and then we will check them, and then we'll take just a little quiz over one-step equations. We're going to wrap up our one-step equations today. So if you're watching this at home, go ahead and pause the video here and try the last 7 problems, and then unpause to see how you did. All right, number 18. We're going to divide by negative 1/3. So 7 divided by negative 1/3. So 7 divided by, then we'd have a negative 1, ABC key, and then 3. So W equals negative 21. And also remember, you can check 7 equals negative 1/3 times negative 21. And those parentheses in your calculator are just right above the 8 and 9 keys. So if I put this in and check, I get 7 equals 7. And you can check every single one of these when you take your quiz today. You can also check as well. In number 19, we're going to divide by negative 4/5. So 60 divided by negative 4/5. We get negative 75 equals our K. And again, you can put that back in and check. In number 20, we divide by 1/4. So P equals negative 36. In number 21, we divide by 2/3. So our X equals, it ends up being a negative 2/3. Number 22, we divide by negative 1 1/3. Now, if you're using your calculator with your ABC key, you would have to do negative 1, ABC 1, then ABC 3. Or you can change it to an improper fraction like we talked about earlier today. So you'd have 3 times 1 is 3, and then you would add the 1, so you get negative 4/3. If you don't want to deal with trying to enter the mixed numbers into the calculator, that's okay. Change them to an improper fraction. Number 22 also ends up being negative 2/3 for our R value. In 23 and 24, again, we're seeing those mixed numbers. If you want to, 7 4/7. 7 times 7 is 49. 49 plus 3 would be 53/7. So if you don't want to deal with the mixed numbers, you can make it improper. Sometimes that's easier to put in the calculator or just to work with in general if you would have to do the computation by hand for some reason. Negative 14. And then last but not least, number 24, we have to be careful. I've had some people switching it. We have to make sure we divide by what's in front of the variable. And again, if you want to with that mixed number, 12 times 2 is 24, plus 1 would be 25/12. Ignore the negative sign when you're changing to an improper fraction. So up to you. We end up with negative 2 7/9 equals C. Now I should have gone back and checked because I just caught a mistake on 22. Hopefully you caught it as well. And actually the answer isn't the mistake. I did something that I've been seeing a lot of students do today. And I'm just automatically trying to divide by what's over on the right side. And that happens. Sometimes we get in a habit and we divide by the wrong thing. We need to get the variable by itself. So in 22, I should have divided by 2. And we end up with negative 2/3 is our R. And that's where it pays to go back and check. That's where it pays to make sure we go back and check. So once you have these 6 all wrapped up under control, go ahead and take the 2.1 quiz.